I'm Julia Turner, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest. Alien is back, now with more Aliens edition. It's Wednesday, August 20th, 2025, and on today's show, we're talking about Alien Earth, a new TV show based on Ridley Scott's legendary sci-fi saga that brings the creepy, crawly, slithery, slimy, dripping, somehow always creatures to our own planet for the first time. Then we'll check in on the return of King of the Hill, Mike Judge's animated portrait of a Texas family, and examine what Hank, Peggy, and Bobby make of today's American landscape. And finally, we'll dig into the Hollywood Reporter's new package on plastic surgery and how conversations about cosmetic work have moved out of the shadows and onto our feeds. Should we want the Kylie Jenners of the world to be sharing their breast implant protocols? Dana and Steve, the gang is all here. Welcome, Dana.
Hey, good to see you, Julia.
Hey, Julia.
How you doing?
You'll be very familiar with this phenomenon. Flying back from the West Coast yesterday, 3.5-hour delay. It was a long travel day. I'm really fucking tired today, slightly jet lagged, but raring to go.
You sound like it, and that's very exciting. Can I just do a brief announcement to our listeners that I flew American for the first time in a while, and they gave free food to us in coach?
What?
Right?
No.
They were like, for coach, we've got little snack boxes. I was handed like a beautiful little cheese plate that would usually run me $14 on any other airline. I'm still bowled over, and I'm also bowled over that there's not like a nationwide advertising campaign to make me aware of this. I think it must be just on the longer flights, because I did fly American LAX Pittsburgh earlier this year, and there were no free food boxes. But anyway, we have other things to talk about. Among them, Alien.
This episode is brought to you by JCPenney. Yes, JCPenney. And if you've been there recently, you know it's the place to go for jaw-dropping looks at brag-worthy prices. They've got something special for every style and budget, not to mention rewards and deals that make finding those hidden gems even sweeter. If you already shop JCPenney, you're already in on the secret. But if not, it's time to ask. Wait, am I sleeping on JCPenney? Shop JCPenney.com. Yes, JCPenney.
At Capella University, learning online doesn't mean learning alone. You'll get support from people who care about your success, like your enrollment specialist who gets to know you and the goals you'd like to achieve. You'll also get a designated academic coach who's with you throughout your entire program. Plus, career coaches are available to help you navigate your professional goals. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Alien Earth is the new TV show adapting the Ridley Scott, mostly Alien universe, but there are, as we'll get to, some notes of Blade Runner and other Ridley Scott ventures in this show. It is created by Noah Hawley, who adapted the Coen brothers universe for his Fargo series of miniseries. It stars Sydney Chandler, yes, daughter of Kyle, as Wendy, a new hybrid type whereby the soul of a human is put into an invulnerable body by one of the 5 corporations that have divided this future Earth into territories. The action commences on a deep space mission that we'll hear a clip from in a minute, where a motley group has gathered specimens to be brought back for the examination of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, but things happen and the ship crashes in the territory of the Prodigy Corporation that's manufacturing these new hybrids with human souls put into invulnerable bodies. We're going to start with a clip that perhaps conveys the ominousness of this Weyland-Yutani mission.
You all good, Captain?
Hey, commas are down. Looks like the log files are corrupted.
Well, it's probably just a glitch. I can have a look.
No. Security will investigate.
We're also burning way too much fuel. I want you and Tang looking into what system we can shut down.
Why don't we just shoot Chibusu's specimens into space and shut down a little zoo?
Okay, I think he means real suggestions.
This is a real suggestion. Those things give me the creeps.
Yeah, me too.
Specimens are the mission.
Easy for you to say, cyborg.
I didn't bother to introduce the actors in that scene because when things go haywire on this ship, all but one of them perish. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say. But I will start with you, Dana, as a longtime student and fan, I believe, of the Alien universe. What did you make of this transmogrification of the xenomorphs?
I mean, for what it's worth, first of all, I kind of only consider the first two Alien movies to really be, I don't know, actually part of a universe that I care to see extended. I mean, the thing I guess that makes this franchise available for things like turning it into a sort of fanfic style TV series is that it is a pretty simple and flexible concept. Like corporation runs universe, aliens invade ship, and then it becomes a sort of battle of the human versus the post-human. And that leaves a lot of room for flexibility that this show explores, as we'll get into. But as far as sort of standalone cinema and movies that I would ever want to go back and see again, I feel like it's really just Ridley Scott's Alien and James Cameron's Aliens. And Noah Hawley, I think, is bringing in more than that, including, I believe, some Blade Runner references, which maybe we can get into, as apparently he did in the Fargo show as well. He was sort of dealing with the Coens' whole oeuvre, even though it was just the movie Fargo he was expanding. That's, I think, a little bit the position that Ridley Scott's films hold here, because the kind of dystopia he seems to be building out from the first couple of episodes is a Blade Runner-esque dystopia in which, you know, the corporation has taken the place of the nation state. So does it all work or not? I mean, I'm pretty sure that we can all agree that at the very least, this show is ambitious. It doesn't feel like it's lazily riding on the coattails of the Alien universe. It does feel like an imaginative expansion, maybe in the way that Andor is an expansion of the Star Wars universe, though I think not as smartly. To me, this series is both very intriguing in the ideas that it takes on and somewhat dramatically unengaging. I don't think that I came out of the pilot, which is the first 2-hour-long episodes, particularly caring about any of the characters as fully developed individuals, but some of the ideas about, well, AI, even though I'm not sure that term is ever used, but, you know, the idea of non-human intelligences and also human intelligences planted in non-human bodies and the various transmogrifications of the post-human that this show explores, I think is the most interesting thing about it. Unfortunately, I don't think that always goes with the best writing in terms of establishing who these individual characters are. So, for example, all of these hybrids that you were referring to, all of whom we've met so far are children, essentially the minds of children, most of them who were terminally ill. And rather than let them die, their parents signed them over to this corporation called Prodigy and agreed to have them implanted in these, I guess, I don't know what to call them, synthetic bodies. So there you get this interesting thing for the actors to do, which is play a sort of tween inside of an adult body who's being used by a corporation for their nefarious purposes. And I think that's just a better idea on paper than it actually plays out to be in the show. So I felt kind of a sense of disappointment when the child characters appeared because I just didn't understand who they were as people. And I think I liked the show better when it was doing big idea kind of, you know, dystopian corporate satire, as in the character of the boy trillionaire, who I hope we'll talk about. But I will cede the floor to Steve and ask what he thought.
Dana, I think I'm even more of an Alien purist than you, right? Like, so for me, it's that first movie was just unsurpassable. It's like one of the most terrifying, I think, disorienting movies ever made. I saw it in the movie theater and it just haunted you for weeks, practically, the all of it, right? And so it's not only the genius of like Ridley Scott and the career-making tour de force from Sigourney Weaver, and like it's a great monster movie, it's a great sci-fi movie, it's a great horror movie, all in one, completely seamlessly. It's not only the genius of Ridley Scott, though; it's also the design genius of H.R. Geiger, the Swiss artist who created the biomechanical aesthetic that then got used in the movie, and in fact, he was part of the team that made the film. And so this idea of xenomorphism or something, like these blending of the machine-like quality of the monster and the beast-like quality of the technology was just what that aesthetic was completely about. I love that movie, and no one's ever replicated that. You know, I mean, whatever I was, 8th or ninth grade, you know, feeling of inner terror at that film. And so I just am I was even disappointed in the James Cameron one, which makes me such a weird sort of snob. People loved it. I thought this got off to an incredibly promising start in that opening scene because it has some of the Altman like, fly on the wall ensemble effect that the first movie did a great job of exploiting, because it produces this contrast between the ultra futuristic technology and the fact that people are still people, like they still gossip and flirt and fuck and betray one another and eventually die. I thought that got going right away in scene one, but of course they're all slaughtered summarily. As to the show in general, I thought the first episode was pretty good, but there were several and I watched the two that are available. I thought the second was considerably weaker and more rote. But the first one I thought was quite promising. But I have a bunch of questions that I'm going to sort of bump over to Julia with. One is, don't you find it sort of hard to believe that you can now transfer human consciousness between a carbon-based body and a synthetic one, but you haven't cured cancer? That was the sort of first thing that was a little bit like, huh? And then there were a series of related ones, which is, we're way in the future. I think, aren't we 160 plus years into the future? But there's an odd preoccupation with the pop culture of the 20th century, just as it coincided with the childhood, I think, of the creator of the show. It gave me a window, Julia, into the thing that started to bother me about the show, which is that we are exploring the deeply personal preoccupations of the creator in a way that prevented me from getting lost in terror or the rapture of terror, the sublimity of terror that this whole IP seems designed to produce. But anyway, I'd love to hear what you think.
I think I like this show a lot better than either of you. I think it's really ambitious. I think it's really beautiful. Like it's pretty technically gorgeous and I think really well acted. Our heroine Wendy is obsessed with her human brother, played by Alex Lothar, who is, I think, they're both really good actors, and her kind of yearning for him. He thinks she's dead. She is sort of following him by watching him through various surveillance screens all the time, and eventually sets out to save him. I found that relationship and that human yearning to be really well acted and compelling. Like, I care about her going to get him and the mysteries of reconnection. And I don't know, I gave a lot of more leeway, I think, than either of you to this dystopian universe. Like, I don't know what they're nostalgic for now that everything's so screwed, but maybe they're nostalgic for the last era before everything got screwed, Like, maybe this dystopian world stopped producing culture and sport and playtime and human endeavors about when it started to go south and turn into corporate chaos. For me, the major problem with this show is the aliens. Like, I just don't like being scared. And I feel like you mentioned Andor, Dana. I sort of wish this was truly the Andor version of the alien universe, where it's like, let's just put aside all those yucky aliens and just make it about let's do a Blade Runner show. Like, the notion of these corporations have divided the world into five. The corner of the world that's creating these synthetics is run by this boy trillionaire who is also, I think, very well performed as this kind of callow, bored, smart, wealthy, potentate boy king. And I don't know. I felt like I'm curious about the world, interested in the culture it was drawing. I felt like they were setting up something rich to explore. And then every time I got interested, they would be walking down a hallway and something would drip, drip, drip on their heads. And then something would hiss and scuttle out from the shadows. And I get that that's like the high side. that's the selling point of Alien, but just not for me. So I actually thought this was a fabulous show for people other than me who enjoy being scared by all those slithery, creepy crawlies. But it sounds like you guys did not have the same response. Dana, I know you were curious about the Boy King character. What'd you think of that thread?
Yeah, I just thought he was a great extrapolation of, tendencies in tech and in finance and just in our culture right now, right? I mean, he's like taking the Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk figure to to the far extreme of being an actual wonderkind. There's some ridiculous reference to him having begun his company Prodigy when he was 6, which sort of goes with, in general, the fact that this show, in which what a child is such a central question, doesn't seem to have a very clear sense of how old these transplanted children are supposed to be. Like the girl who is transplanted into Wendy, the main character's body, it's very unclear to me why she looks to be 11 or 12, but speaks and relates to the world like she's 7 or 8. Like all of that stuff seemed
I
a little
agree.
bit garbled.
I think you're right that it's a little fuzzy, and the kind of intellectual ideas being pursued here feel a little bit more like a soup of potential than a rigorous thesis, in the way that Andor's ideas seem so methodically laid out. But it's an interesting soup. Like, I think I could see this show building something intelligent and cool out of these ideas. And one of my favorite parts is that, you know, Wendy galvanizes the group of synthetic children in adult bodies to go help save her brother. But what this means is essentially she, with the aid of Timothy Oliphant, who is styled like Rutger Hauer in the Blade Runner movie and is sort of a guardian watchdog of these creatures, you know, she and he are like leading these children into this battle zone with the aliens and into a collapsing building, and everybody responds like children. Like they're all like, yuck, and they panic and they don't know what to do and they're totally unpredictable. And it's sort of a mechanism for having the humans in the scenes behave more as humans might if they encountered a skittering, you know, a rapacious skittering eyeball that wants to possess you and suck your soul out. Like in action movies, people don't actually behave very human. And there was some kind of comedy and slapstick of the children grown-ups being totally befuddled and panicky in the face of the aliens that I thought added a like nice comedic element, even if exactly how old they are and why anybody thought it was a good idea for them to like be led into a collapsing building battle with aliens is a little bit mysterious.
The only thing I would add is that I think it's kind of funny, and I think the symmetry is a sort of curiously meaningful, that you have all this IP come out of that period in the 1970s when the current era is sort of starting to emplace itself, like income inequality is starting to happen, and then you get, of course, at the end of the 70s, early 80s, you get Reaganism and it explodes, and you get tech and you get finance and all that stuff. It was sort of coinciding with that. A lot of very inchoate anxieties went into making movies. This one being among the most anxious, and when you look at it, that movie, the original film was a vicious commentary on privatization. That's like one of the big reveals of the movie is that this thing is a weapon, or is being cultivated as this beast is being cultivated as technology. And, these were totally disposable workers who were returning with it. And I just think it's funny that we're at the end of that historical arc. We're still, cannibalizing the IP from that period, right? Like it's the same dread that's being repurposed as much as, the way the monster looks, or, and it's like not inchoate anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I'm intrigued by this, but I don't know how far I can follow it, because the satire, for example, of the trillionaire owner, right? It's the privatization trend has been taken to the absolute extreme, which is like the Westphalian world has disappeared and now it's just 5 companies. And but the problem I have with that is it discloses nothing about our world via satire, which is about exaggerating and flattening, because it's happening every day in the real world, right? Like our real world is exaggerated and flattened by these very same forces. And it makes me want dimensionality and nuance. And I was a little disappointed when the show started off by giving me that, then killed all the dimensional and nuanced characters. And then we get into these parables about childhood and a satire that I found a little hard to connect with. But I'm going to continue watching. That's a long-winded way of saying that.
Wow, Steve, you're going to keep watching. Okay, that is a surprise result. The show is Alien Earth by Noah Hawley. It's an FX show. You can find it on Hulu, and I think it is worth your checking out if you have a sterner stomach than I do. All right, let's move on.
All right, well, as summer winds down, refreshing your wardrobe with staple pieces for the season ahead is clutch. It's totally clutch. Quince nails it with luxe essentials that feel effortless and look polished, perfect for layering and mixing. You'll find yourself reaching for them again and again. Dana, I have to throw to you here. It's almost like we do a Quince segment every week now, which we're delighted to do. Talk to me. What's your latest?
Yeah, I wanted to be the you this time and get to be the person who talks about a Quince piece because I have a new one, and it's a lovely summer dress that I wish I'd gotten earlier in the summer. I actually had the very rare experience of being complimented by my daughter on a garment that I was wearing instead of the usual, like, that needs a belt, or like, that doesn't flatter you. Her fashion feedback tends to have some sort of like critical element, and this was a rare, like, you look fantastic, I love that dress, you should wear it much more often. It's called the 100% European linen fit and flare midi dress. Julia, I just put a link to it in the chat so you can look at it and help me describe it, but it's this great kind of 50s silhouette, like a really full skirt that actually has an underskirt and then a square neck.
Ooh, and it's on big sale right now.
Oh, is it? Maybe I'll have to get another color. You're right.
It looks great. I cannot improve upon your description, other than it looks like it has some cute shirring on the back panel, which I bet makes it flattering on people of different shapes and sizes.
All right. Well, this is just the easiest sell in the world for us on this show. We love your products, Quince. Elevate your fall wardrobe essentials with Quince. Go to quince.com/culture for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culture to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culture.
Dana, before our next topic, can you deliver the business?
I can. This is the time in the show when we talk about our business, about which we only have one piece of business this week. It's to tell you about our bonus segment, which will appear separately in your feed if you're a Slate Plus subscriber. Today, we're going to be talking about a piece by Lauren Collins, wonderful writer for The New Yorker, who's been a guest on this show before. She's not a guest this time around, but we're talking about her recent article, The Case for Lunch, which is in part an argument for the superiority of that midday meal and in part a sort of history of Parisian dining. It's a wonderfully quirky and charming piece. And because we all had very different feelings about lunch, and it's always fun to debate food topics, we thought we would cover that for Slate Plus today. If you're not a Slate Plus subscriber, you might want to consider becoming one. Slate Plus offers a lot of benefits. You get ad-free versions of all of our podcasts. You get bonus episodes for many of them, including this one. And of course, you get unlimited access to all of the writing and all of the podcasting on slate.com. This is your opportunity to support Slate and our show and our magazine. So if you're interested and you haven't signed up already, please go to slate.com/culture plus. That's slate.com/culture plus. All right, back to the show.
Next up, we're heading back to Arlen, Texas. King of the Hill, the beloved animated sitcom that first aired in 1997, is getting a reboot. Mike Judge and Greg Daniels' wry, deeply American portrait of propane, neighbors, and family life is returning with a mix of familiar and new voices. Judge himself is back as Hank Hill, Kathy Najimy reprises Peggy, Pamela Adlon returns as Bobby. We find Hank and Peggy returning from a sojourn in Saudi Arabia to contemplate how America has changed. In this clip, Hank learns that his neighbor Dale Gribble, a kooky conspiracy theorist, has had a strange and unexpected arc while he was away.
How did Dale let this happen?
I was wondering when you'd get around to me.
Dale, how long have you been in that trash can?
I can't be too careful. As a former government official, I am on many nations' kill lists as well as their do not accept checks lists.
Former government official?
You are looking at the former mayor of Arlen.
What? When did this happen?
During the pandemic.
He ran and won on the anti-mask campaign.
And when Bill says anti, I mean anti. No mask for COVID, no mask for tear gas, no mask for catchers.
Who voted for that nonsense?
I did. Mayor Gribble was the devil you know. And I was already used to him following me home, and his chokeholds are weak as hell.
Hey, man, I voted for him, did like a dang old joke, man. Did like with that dang old high school, man.
And with a field of 11 candidates to split the vote, I won with a simple plurality of 9%.
All right, we're going to start with Dana here, our resident Texan, who has had a long time, not much discussed on this show, soft spot for the original King of the Hill. Dana, pronounce once and for all. Was it a mistake or a glorious triumph to bring this show back? And more seriously, what'd you like about the first one, and do you think this one works?
Yeah. I mean, I will hold off on deciding whether it was a mistake or not. We are clearly in the era of the legacy sequel, where if enough people are alive that originally made any movie or show, they somehow must be convoked again to revisit those characters. So I guess for me, the question is just, does this show do that well or not, and make it feel like a deserved place to return to? It's really hard for me to imagine watching this reboot not knowing the initial show at all. The initial show to me is just so much a part of what I consider sort of TV wallpaper, and but nice wallpaper, like wallpaper that I would often return to in the years that it was on the air and when it was in syndication afterward. I just find King of the Hill a real comfort show. I think it occupied a similar place for me with The Simpsons, though I don't think it's quite as great as the glory days of The Simpsons. But it had a similar sensibility in the sense that it's social satire, but it's also warm at heart. And it has the same structure as most cartoon comedy shows, in that, at least in the olden days, it would sort of reset at the beginning of each episode. There weren't really through lines in the story. There are a little bit more in this new season, and I want to talk about that later. But King of the Hill is just unique. I mean, Mike Judge, I think I've given my Beavis and Butthead rant before in the show, but I think that show is so underrated and such a triumph of 1990s culture. And what makes it a triumph is it's so much the vision of one person. You know, it's Mike Judge does both the voices. I'm talking about Beavis and Butthead now, but he does two of the main voices in King of the Hill as well. You know, and is of course the co-creator and co-writer of the show. And it just feels like something that emerged from a specific person's sensibility, though of course he has collaborators. So yeah, I think if you didn't know some of the recurring tropes of the old show, you probably wouldn't not just get all the jokes in this one, but sort of get the more moving moments. For example, to me, the real reason that I'm happy that this new season exists is that we get to see Bobby Hill grow up. And Bobby Hill, voiced by Pamela Adlon, is I think one of the great animated characters of our era. He was just such an unusual kid. I don't know if you guys went back and watched any of the original shows where Bobby is a tween. He's like 11, 12, 13. I think he's 13 when the original show ends. Now we join him at the age of 21, and he's perfectly congruent with what that weird kid would have been. Sort of the recurring phrase that Hank Hill, the dad, would have about his son. It's sort of the way that Homer would always, throttle Bart in what's now a very incorrect, but I still think funny tableau. Hank's equivalent of that was that he would say, "That boy ain't right." And he always thought that there was sort of something wrong with Bobby because Bobby didn't know how to follow the codes of masculinity. Well, here we are all these years later. Bobby is an adult. He's now an aspiring chef. He runs his own Japanese German fusion restaurant. And he is nothing but right. He's the most morally just and also I think, most endearing and warmest character on the show, while still being a very flawed person who makes tons of mistakes. But he's just such an odd creature, especially with Pamela Adlon's incredible voice work. I want to listen to just a little bit of Bobby's voice, since we didn't get to hear it in the first clip, because my ode to Bobby would not be the same if you don't get to hear Pamela Adlon's voice.
You know, many things make a great beer, Dad. Proper carbonation is just one. I served 12 different beers at my restaurant, which I had to narrow down from 20 by considering the notes, texture, umami content, which is 5.7, by the way, oxidation.
My beer has hops.
Yep, it sure does, Dad. All beer has hops, and bread has wheat, and candy has sugar. It's the type of hops, how you use them, and when.
And since we're talking about voice work, it's impossible not to note for longtime fans of King of the Hill that at least 4 of the cast members have now died, some of them quite recently and in tragic ways. Johnny Hardwick, who does the voice of Dale Gribble, actually died during the course of recording this season. So he plays Dale on some of the shows and not on other shows. Jonathan Joss, who played the character John Redcorn, just recently died in what may have been a homophobia-related incident in his yard in Texas. Brittany Murphy, famously, who played the wonderful character of Luann, who's no longer on the show, died of drug-related causes. Tom Petty did a lot of recurring great character on the show. And of course, we lost him recently. So there's a melancholy as well in watching these new episodes with those very visible absences. Steve, I gather that you, like Julia, had no familiarity with King of the Hill, which seems odd to me to anyone who turned on a TV in the first decade of this century. But this was your very first viewing of any of these characters?
No, definitely not the very first. But I had only the most glancing, like maybe it was on at the gym when I was on a treadmill or something, relationship to King of the Hill. I think it fell into, I mean, just it wasn't any particular reason. It was just in my TV watching autobiography, that was like a blank spot, right? Kind of, it was like the cartoon format in a much more old-fashioned sitcom package than, for example, The Simpsons. And it's like that hybrid somehow didn't quite work for me. And I just never found it funny. And I really like Mike Judge, and I had those same feelings about Beavis and Butthead. It was just astonishing, like incredibly, like wildly weird and original little MTV interstitial that grew into like an art project and a statement. And I just think Judge is kind of a genius. But I had the same reaction this time, which is there's an affability and a decency and a groundedness to it. The pacing is so skew and so funny. And I think that there's something sincere about its anthropology, which is, it's looking at Texas from both the inside and the outside, and its endearments and its hypocrisies are both on display, but in this really nice, gentle way, right? Like it's not a sharp cornered show, and the experience of watching it is kind of funnily comforting. I wonder, and many reviewers explored this, intelligently, the relationship of such a show to the present tense. And at just the moment that Texas is, for example, locking up a black woman lawmaker, Texas Republicans are literally locking up and imprisoning a black woman lawmaker. This, like, something about the Americanness of me and the Americanness of Texas can join up and form a mutual affection, which seems to me the kind of wonderful basis of the spirit of the show. And I believe the show still has the spirit. I don't think I have it, and I don't think Texas has it. And so this form of escapism was hard for me to indulge in. And to this day, I just don't find the show like very funny. Something about it, it just does not, it never makes me laugh out loud.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think like literally never seen a minute of it and had just kind of assumed it was like a Red State Simpsons. And so I watched some old episodes and a bunch of the new ones in preparation for this and realized that it sort of is a Red State Simpsons in that it's like a animated family sitcom for kids and adults that's like got many kooky side characters and is exploring interesting themes. But it's so gentle in its comedic rhythms. It does not have like the manic plate spinning joke a minute, joke a second satirical impulses of The Simpsons. It's like a much chiller show in its rhythms in a way that's nice. It makes it a pleasant watch. Like I really enjoyed it, and I totally fell for Bobby. I agree, Dana. Like what a sweetheart, and his different endeavors as a young man are really charming. Like I could definitely imagine myself continuing to watch the show much more than Alien Earth. But I also found myself trying to figure out what it was doing with American politics and American masculinity. And I think it's much better on masculinity than politics, even though the two are intertwined. And I think my jury is a little bit out on whether the holding politics at an arm's length is a way to explore the questions of masculinity more deeply or whether it's avoidant. But the show is smart in its construction in that it allows Hank and Peggy to be returning from spending time in Saudi Arabia, which Peggy, one of the recurring jokes is that Peggy seems to pronounce it Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia in an amusing fashion.
I mean, this is kind of a throwback to a Peggy longstanding trope, which is that she was a substitute Spanish teacher who couldn't really speak Spanish, but thought she could.
Yeah, I think they carry that forward with her confidence in her own grasp of Arabic, which does not seem to be much in evidence in as far as we can tell. So they get to behold the nation anew and sort of marvel at. There's a scene a couple episodes in where they visit the George W. Bush Museum, and the rest of the fellow attendees turn out to be like Newsmax wingnuts who are not grounded in reality, and Hank finds that alienating. Like Hank is clearly a Bulwark subscriber or something. Like he's a non and it doesn't say what he is, but you sort of imagine that he's a never Trumper, although I gather there's been much debate about what his political preferences might have been. So that helps, but I agree. I was trying to figure out, if Mike Judge is the person who brought us Idiocracy, which with every passing minute of every passing day seems more and more like a documentary of our future, the kind of sharp cultural acuity present in that work and in Office Space and in other pieces of it just feels muted here. And I'm curious, Dana, like in the original show, what was it doing with Texas? Like, was it a love letter? Was it a critique? What did it make you think and feel as a Texan?
I mean, it certainly was never pointedly political in either of the two iterations, but obviously in the early 2000s, it was unfolding in a very different political space, right? So Dale Gribble, the character who's a conspiracy theorist, was more endearing. I mean, it's much harder to play Dale Gribble's bizarre moments, like when we heard him pop out of the trash can and, opine about the various government organizations that were watching him. It's a lot harder to hear that in 2025 and not make the associations with him and some true nefarious actors who are actually exercising power, as Stephen mentioned, in, connection with the current crisis in the Texas Senate or Congress, House of Congress. It's harder not to make those connections now. And the show, I don't think, is quite brave enough in making them for you. I mean, this isn't South Park, right? And it's not even The Simpsons, as you pointed out, Julia. It's a much gentler show than that is much more family centric. So I don't ask it to be doing this constant caustic Trump satire. And I don't even mind the fact that so far in all the episodes I've seen, it has not mentioned Trump directly. It's sort of used the George W. Bush Museum as, the model for conservative politics. But no, I think it was an affectionate portrait of a different Texas. And what I would say in standing up for the show and for Texas against what Steve was saying is that, Texas is essentially and has been for a long time a state that's trying to turn blue, and because of various kinds of electoral chicanery is not able to turn blue, right? It's a very diverse state. Every single city in it votes consistently blue in presidential elections. And I think that while not making that conflict front and center, this show kind of shows that. This show has always been, even back in the 90s when this was a very rare thing, the era of Friends and all of these all-white sitcoms has always shown a more diverse Texas, a more diverse setting than typical shows of this type. And I feel like it's a portrait of the place that Texas could be if it were not being constantly reamed by GOP politics. I think that Hank Hill is meant to represent some sort of decency that still exists in the rural heartland, and that Mike Judge is trying to make space for that. I would agree that it, especially in this new season, is maybe a little muddled exactly what he is trying to say about it. But I don't think this is let's all coo over how cute Trump voters are.
All right. Well, the King of the Hill reboot is available to you on Hulu. And I'm glad I checked it out. I don't know that it's going to become a regular watch, but just for the pure sweetness and sincerity of all of their relationships, I found it really charming in a lot of ways, and I may give it more of my hang time. On to the next.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Everyone can use a little help to shape the direction of their lives, from fitness routines to mental resilience or navigating personal goals to tackling burnout. That's what the Life Kit podcast from NPR is here to do. If you're looking to move with more intention or just need thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. Life Kit offers real stories, relevant insights, and clear takeaways to help you meet those large and small decision-making moments with confidence and clarity. Trusted voices and expert advice can help take you to the next step, however big or small. Listen to Life Kit to hear thoughtful conversations that unpack the emotional and practical side of personal wellness, along with actionable guidance you can actually use. No fluff, no judgment. Get help tackling common issues like relationships, finances, parenting, and your career. Then walk away with a game plan you can implement right away. Life Kit isn't just another podcast about self-improvement. It's about understanding how to live a little better starting now. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
On Instagram, a few months ago, a user complimented Kylie Jenner on having gotten the perfect boob job, and Kylie Jenner herself hopped into the comments and said, 445cc, moderate profile, half under the muscle, triple exclamation point, silicone, triple exclamation point, Garth Fisher, triple exclamation point. Hope this helps, LOL, period. Much was made of this exact recipe for Kylie Jenner's current anatomy. And in keeping with this trend, The Hollywood Reporter has a cover package out on the new face of Hollywood, talking about both an increasing tendency among Hollywood celebrities to be transparent and forthcoming about what surgical and cosmetic procedures they undergo in their quest for beauty. Also about the changing trends in what types of looks they seek to achieve. And of course, oh so usefully, a gigantic list of all the best plastic surgeons in various cities who can deliver these looks to you down to the CC, should you so desire. We thought this package was an interesting opportunity for the three of us to talk about changing beauty standards, changing mores, about discussing our beauty standards, and what we think about how everyone looks. Steve, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you make of the celebrity face these days?
I'm probably overly fond of the old, saw that at whatever 15 you have the face you were born with, and at 50 you have the face you deserve. Like, I'm definitely an old style authenticity moralist of the Gutenberg era. And so for me, the rise of plastic surgery in my childhood was like, oh, that's a signifier of, like, that is maybe the signifier in authenticity, rearranging your God or biology given features. It's what's the face? It's like the thing that separates the inner and the outer. It's the thing that you use to veil or reveal in extremis, right? The inner you to others. And it's the idea that you would not only that you would alter it in some way in order to achieve a permanent maskhood or disguise, but also free by necessity, especially with the rise of Botox. But even before, I mean, sort of any kind of plastic surgery tends to freeze in place your features, these things that are just, I'm leaving. I mean, the funny thing too is when you look at a plastics overly, I'm not going to use a normative term like that. When you look at a face that's gone beyond a certain degree of plastic surgery, only the eyes remain as the window to the soul, right? And yet they have a kind of anomalous and often sometimes very sort of sunken aspect to them. I can't help it. I'm like of the era and social type that will find this creepy. That said, like, I find myself more and more open to the idea that authenticity is an entirely historical phenomenon that arose out of certain sets of social conditions that are just disappearing. And once the social conditions disappear, authenticity is just a flog that, insecure loners like me use to moralize against things that we find alienating or don't like. I kind of, and maybe a new form of authenticity is the Warhol one, which is just like living in frank admission of the absence of authenticity as a paradigm in your being. And so in a weird way, I was like oddly refreshed by this frankness, whatever its motives are, that at least the inner shame that was the remnant or the feeling that one ought to give some kind of like offering to the old style of authenticity by hiding the fact that you had plastic surgery, like just go ahead and evolve beyond it, right? Like if you're going to do it unapologetically. But in terms of aesthetics, I mean, it could be that some people have magnificent work and I've never noticed it, and I just think of them as quote unquote beautiful. I wonder what it would be like, Dana, on this issue of authenticity, to discover that someone who's like not whose beauty, not that you were in awe of necessarily, but you thought correlated the sort of magical quality that a certain kind of beauty has, that it correlates with something inner or essential about the person. Would those feelings about that beauty alter if you discovered that, I don't know, fill in the blank, had plastic surgery? Or am I just like barking up dead trees?
Yeah, I mean, a fascinating feature of this coverage we were reading about plastic surgery is that women are the ones who are starting to admit it. Like Kylie Jenner, Kris Jenner, various, sort of female
Various
celebrities
Jenners.
are out there. Yeah, Jenners of all sorts are out there talking about the work they had done. And the taboo that seems to be remaining is that men don't want to talk about their plastic surgery, whether it's hairline, what is it called? Hair implants, which very few celebrities who have obviously gotten them will admit to having gotten them, or, just all these various kind of man interventions are being kept much more on the DL, which just indicates this strange moment where beauty culture is starting to universalize itself. So even if one might applaud the idea that being straightforward about interventions that you've done is a way of destigmatizing them, and also just showing, the enormous amount of labor that it's always taken women to appear feminine and beautiful and all the things they're supposed to appear, right? They're all artificial. Do you really think that putting Botox in your face is that different than putting makeup on your face? They're both trying to trick people into thinking you have a different looking face. So I feel like for women, it is probably a good thing that people are coming out of the closet about these surgeries and interventions, but that doesn't quite address the larger question of the need to keep on doing the alterations. I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit further along the spectrum of not being as disturbed by this than Stephen is. But there also still is a side of me that is, I think, creating hierarchies where it's sort of like if something you do is impermanent, I think I feel less queasy about it than if it is a permanent surgical kind of alteration. And maybe I should just strip away all of those feelings. But I do sort of feel like there is that line, right? I mean, we haven't really talked about Mar-a-Lago face yet, but there definitely is a line that one crosses where it seems like, are you trying to make your face look more like you want it to look, or are you trying to achieve someone else's face on your body? And that seems like it heads toward a kind of dysmorphia that is disturbing in and of itself.
I don't know if it's I'm not so much of an authenticity police person, and Steve, I would love to dive in at some point into what Gutenberg has to do with it, but we can come back around to that if we get to it.
He had a really good BBL, that's all.
I mean, Gutenberg just had like great bone structure.
I mean, you laugh, and I love that it's at my expense, but the whole notion of human interiority arises out of the production of the book and sitting alone with the book, which gave rise to Protestantism and the schism and being alone with God and having a conscience and being an authentic human being. Julia, keep up.
The idea, there's nothing more Stephen Metcalf than the idea that is just an unbroken chain of logic that everyone in the world would make.
Duh.
I thought you knew me.
Duh. Okay. Well, from Gutenberg to Lindsay Lohan's face, may we all happily traverse so seamlessly. I will just cop to my own hypocrisy here. I feel like as a youth, I was like, who would do that? Like, we're so lucky to have bodies. There are bodies. Why would you undergo risk to have a different body? So many different types of bodies and faces can be beautiful. Then I started getting older and doing more Zoom calls and looking at my own face and being like, my face doesn't look the way it used to. And I feel like there's I wish I had a different face type of face procedure. And then there's the I wish my face looked like the face that it used to look like type of procedure. And I think the second one is like a much more tempting, slippery slope for people because that does feel like your face. It's just your old face. And yet, I mean, I live in the west side of LA. Like my morning walks to coffee, I'm just plunged in a pool of like people who look demented. And again, just to cop to my snobbery and judgment here, but they, the kind of previous style of plastic surgery, which is now Mar-a-Lago face and is increasingly being rejected in Los Angeles, but there's still plenty of evidence of it, of the kind of like poofy lips and poofy cheeks and filler everywhere, and everyone sort of ends up looking like a Bratz doll. You know, I loved the moment in 28 years later where, having not seen technology for however long, 28 years, I guess it's in the title, just as obvious as Gutenberg, you know, our hero looks at a picture of the visiting soldier's girlfriend and it's just like, what's wrong with her face? Did she eat something? Like, that face is so aesthetically unappealing to me, and became aesthetically unappealing to me long before it became associated with Trump cronyism. Like, I just don't like the way it looks. I wouldn't want to look like that. It seems to convey something about the person's behind the face to me, which is that you are so deluded and dysmorphic in your own vanity that you can't see that you're destroying yourself. And that just seems so tragic to me. I mean, I'm not playing by the modern politics of everybody do what they want with their body. Like, my personal response to that face is revulsion. And I haven't done any of these procedures in part because I'm like, what if I turn into one of those people? That's like a nightmare. I do think it's interesting that there is a actual shift right now in the techniques that are in favor. Like, I do think that poof face is out of favor. And it seems like, and part of what the Hollywood Reporter's reporting on this suggests, is that the ascendant practitioners are the ones who are figuring out how to revive and revamp the old facelift, where they do just kind of snug you up and you look more like your old self. It's interesting to me that coincides with the moment of transparency, that like when you're willing to admit that you had a facelift is actually when it sort of becomes less obvious because the technique is less grotesque in its results. I don't know what to make of that, but I am with you, Steve, if not on Gutenberg, on the idea that there's something pleasing about the authentic inauthenticity. I mean, I was sort of amused in my rendition of Kylie Jenner's comment, but it's like totally cute and charming that Kylie Jenner jumped into the comments to give her exact recipe. Like, it's sort of some kind of solidarity or something. It was a charming move on her part, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
With the aging piece of it, it's like some people age in ways that are pleasing to them and get elegant crow's feet and, you know, gorgeous swoops of gray, and other people age in ways that they like less. And like, who's to say? It's really your call what you want to see in the mirror. And I don't know. Like, actually, there was a terrific essay by Slate's editor Hillary Fry in the magazine a couple weeks back in which she talked about how her gray came in as an elegant, striking streak, and then the gray changed a bit and became more pervasive, and so she started dyeing her hair to retain the streak. And what are the semiotics of the streak? And I loved reading it in part because my gray is currently a little bit of a streak, and I like it, so I'm not dyeing it. But I bet once it starts coming in different ways that I like less, I'll probably just dye my hair brown again. And like, you know, that's not so different from getting Botox or trying this or that. So anyway, everybody make your body however you want. And don't forget to read books and cultivate your interiority at the same time.
Thanks to Gutenberg.
Maybe that could be a procedure. Like, you go into the doctor and you're like, give me the Gutenberg, please. I would like fully realize interiority and to be perceived from my radiant inner beauty, no matter where I go. All right. Well, the package is Hollywood's new face in the Hollywood Reporter. Check it out and let us know if we're grievously retro in our snobbishness / indulgence.
You come to the New Yorker Radio Hour for conversations that go deeper with people you really want to hear from, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Questlove or Olivia Rodrigo, Liz Cheney, or the godfather of artificial intelligence, Geoffrey Hinton, or some of my extraordinarily well-informed colleagues at the New Yorker. So join us every week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, it's Mary Harris, host of Slate's daily news podcast, What Next? This week, Trump is on the warpath against mail-in voting and voting machines. I know, you've heard this song and dance before. But UCLA's Rick Hasson says, this time is different.
I've been thinking for months now about what we have to do to try to assure that we can have fair and safe elections in November of 2026. And I used to worry only when Donald Trump was on the ballot because it didn't seem like he really cared about these other elections. But I think now Donald Trump has more on the line because the Democratic Congress could make his life miserable.
Check out What Next, wherever you listen.
All right, guys. It is time now for us to endorse.
I am going to do something unusual. I don't think I've ever done it. I'm not sure any of us have done this with the endorsement segment before, but because we have such incredibly well-read listeners, like I can't tell you how many times I've gotten great book, movie, other recommendations from listeners. And of course, the Summer Strut episode is nothing but listener recs. I want to ask for a book recommendation that's very specific, maybe from some historians who are listening to the show. So I want to read a book about Napoleon that is not a straightforward biography like Soup to Nuts, Entire Life of Napoleon, though it could contain some elements of that. It's not a military history. It's not sort of like a history of the Napoleonic Wars, but it's more like a book about the cultural impact of Napoleon in Europe. So this is for something I'm researching, but it's also just something that I've always wanted to understand is sort of like, what did Napoleon mean in his time and shortly thereafter, specifically in France and England, since those are, you know, the two principal combatants in the Napoleonic War. But just, yeah, if you were a human being living in France or England or really anywhere in Western Europe in the first half of the 19th century, what did Napoleon likely mean to you politically and socially and culturally? I'm sure there's a book like that out there. It would be great if it was also a beautifully written, fun to read book that wasn't really dry and dense. But if anybody has recs in that department, please send along a title to culturefest@slate.com.
Oh, all right. I'm going to poke around among some of my history pals and see if I can find you a good rec. I don't have one off the top, but I'd be curious to read it too. On our recent trip, we went to Germany and Austria and spent a bunch of time thinking about German and Prussian history during the Napoleonic era. So I've got questions. Steve, what have you got for our listeners today?
All right. Well, just very quickly to revisit an old endorsement. I finished Spy Who Came in from the Cold, the Le Carre book that it's maybe not the very first George Smiley, but it's not in some ways exactly a George Smiley. But anyway, the great spy novelist introduces more fully George Smiley in that book. But that's an incredible book. I mean, the little blurb on the cover was from Graham Greene, who called it the greatest spy novel ever written. And I certainly see why that's a plausible claim. I mean, that's an astonishing book. It really stayed with me in a way that I wasn't expecting. So highly recommended. But my actual endorsement this week is I just discovered the James Schuyler poem "Empathy and New Year," which is amazing. Schuyler's not the kind of poet that I'm like generally that interested in. Sort of child of Frank O'Hara in his own way, like New York poet of the latter half of the 20th century. But this poem is amazing, and we'll link to it. But I just love to read the end of it. It's a bunch of sort of impressionistic, like loosely affiliated ideas about the new year, which is, I think it's 1967 turning into 1968, I believe. And it just ends so beautifully where Schuyler says, it snowed the night before. I guess he's waking up on New Year's Day, maybe. A snow shovel scrapes. It's 12 hours later, and the sun that came so late is almost gone. A few pink minutes, and yet the days get longer. Coming from the movies last night, snow had fallen in almost still air and lay on all. So all twigs were emboldened to make big disclosures. It felt warm. Warm, that is, for cold, the way it does when snow falls without wind. A snow picture, you said, under the clung-to elms, worth painting. I said, the weather operator said, turning cold to bitter cold. Then the wind, the other partner says, then the wind will veer around to the north and blow all of it down. Maybe I thought it will get cold some other way. You, as usual, were right. It did and has. Night and snow and the threads of life for once, seen as they are, in ropes, like roots. I love that poem. It's so beautiful. Oh my God. It's such a wonderful New Year's poem. And so kind of just pregnant and ominous and zen at the same time. Just an extraordinary. And the funny thing about that poem, Julia, which I think would interest you especially, it occurs to me now, it was written pre-internet, so the technology that they used to mass distribute it was movable type, which is traceable to a guy named Gutenberg. So like commonly it's kind of called the Gutenberg Revolution. And so, one's relationship to that text is, you'd purchase it probably in a store because there wasn't Amazon.
Oh my God.
And you'd crack it open and you'd sit alone somewhere and read it and you'd feel a kind of ensoulment.
I would just like the record to show for every listener that's ever accused Steve of mansplaining to me and Dana that this is what it would sound like if he ever fucking dared to do that sincerely. And he knows that we would come murder him. So no need to chime in on our behalves.
There you go.
My endorsement's a little amorphous today, and it's based on the trip I recently took. Kind of on a lark, because I learned the name of the specific town that some of my ancestors emigrated from in 1869. We decided to go to the town and look at it. I was traveling in Germany and Austria with my mother and my sister, and it seemed like, why not go check it out? We drove to this town. We were able to identify it based on a combination of records my mother had. And then actually, I had never previously used the website Ancestry.com, which is an incredible tool. I'm sure this is Gutenberg level news to anybody who's used it, but I never had because I sort of had conflated it with the 23andMe stuff, which seemed creepy. But you can do a non-genetic, just paperwork version. And it's really interesting what that tool can link you to in terms of public records. But anyway, we'd identified the town. We drove to it. A woman happened to be walking by as we got out of her car and offered to open the little local church in this tiny, tiny town. And we walked into this like beautiful, small, plain, tiny church that like is where my great-great-grandfather probably prayed every weekend, if not more often, until he left at the age of 17 to move to New York City and open a Rathskeller. And it was crazy to be there. Like I just had, I know that there are lots of people who are curious and interested about these things, but it had never occurred to me to be particularly. And it was so, the church itself had been there for hundreds of years. It had it had some Reformation vibes, Steve, and it was just, I don't know. I would, if you have any inclination to go diving and exploring, it was kind of fascinating. And then also, my great-great-grandfather and all of his siblings left in the 1860s, and most of them went to New York. And beginning to kind of look at and think about the history of what was happening politically in Europe at the time, it's like, yeah, I could see why you would get out of Dodge and not be conscripted to fight for all of these different petty groups. Anyway, it's. I guess my recommendation is, if you have any inclination to go crate diving into your own history, it was kind of cool and trippy to do. All right. You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today on our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory theme music is by the composer Nicholas Bertel. Our producer today is Benjamin Frisch. Our PA is Daniel Hirsch. For Dana Stevens and Stephen Metcalf, I'm Julia Turner. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.